What's up, yo? I am the professor. How are you? It's very, very early here in the basin. Very early. I've been up all night going through all your requests, downloading trailers, and I want you to know that I am handcrafting the very finest homemade trailer reactions that I possibly can. We're not the cookie cutters. I'm not just going to tell you, hey, I like this, and smile and hope that you subscribe. I'm going to be honest with you. So let's get into it. The very first, I guess it's really not a trailer. It's a Dr. Shashi Tharoor does Britain own reparations to India. This has been you guys have been hammering me on this one, man. I mean, like, everywhere I turn, react to this, react to this, react to this, react to this. Everywhere I turn around. There it is. There it is. So let's go ahead and take a look at it.
President, and gentlemen, ladies of the House, standing here with 8 minutes in my hands and at this venerable and rather magnificent institution, I was going to assure you that I belong to the Henry VIII School of Public Speaking, that as Henry VIII said to his wives, I shall not keep you long. But now finding myself the seventh speaker out of 8 in what must already seem a rather long evening to you, I rather feel like Henry VIII's last wife. I more or less know what's expected of me, but I'm not sure how to do it any differently. Perhaps what I should do is really try and pay attention to the arguments that were advanced by the opposition today. We had, for example, Sir Richard Ottaway challenging the very idea that it could be argued that the economic situation of the colonies was actually worsened by the experience of British colonialism. Well, I stand to offer you the Indian example, Sir Richard. India's share of the world economy when Britain arrived on its shores was 23%. By the time the British left, it was down to below 4%. Why? Simply because India had been governed for the benefit of Britain. Britain's rise for 200 years was financed by its depredations in India. In fact, Britain's industrial revolution was actually premised upon the deindustrialization of India. The handloom weavers, for example, famed across the world, whose products were exported around the world, Britain came right in. There were actually these weavers making fine muslin, light as woven air, it was said. And Britain came right in, smashed their thumbs, broke their looms, imposed tariffs and duties on their cloth and products, and started, of course, taking the raw materials from India and shipping back manufactured cloth, flooding the world's markets with what became the products of the dark and satanic mills of Victorian England. That meant that the weavers in India became beggars, and India went from being a world-famous exporter of finished cloth into an importer, went from having 27% of world trade to less than 2%. Meanwhile, colonialists like Robert Clive bought their rotten boroughs in England on the proceeds of their loot in India, while taking the Hindi word loot into their dictionaries as well as their habits. And the British had the gall to call him Clive of India, as if he belonged to the country, when all he really did was to ensure that much of the country belonged to him. By the end of the 19th century, the fact is that India was already Britain's biggest cash cow, the world's biggest purchaser of British goods and exports, and the source of highly paid employment for British civil servants. We literally paid for our own oppression. And as has been pointed out, the wealthy Victorian British families that made their money out of the slave economy, 1/5 of the elites of the wealthy class in Britain in the 19th century owed their money to transporting 3 million Africans across the waters. And in fact, in 1833, when slavery was abolished, what happened was that a compensation of £20 million was paid, not as reparations to those who had lost their lives or who had suffered or been oppressed by slavery, but to those who had lost their property. I was struck by the fact that your Wi-Fi password at this union commemorates the name of Mr. Gladstone, the great liberal hero. Well, I'm sorry, his family was one of those who benefited from this compensation. Staying with India, between 15 and 29 million Indians died of starvation in British-induced famines. The most famous example, of course, was the Great Bengal Famine during the Second World War, when 4 million people died because Winston Churchill, deliberately as a matter of written minuted policy, proceeded to divert essential supplies from civilians in Bengal to sturdy Tommies and Europeans as reserve stockpiles. He said that the starvation of anyway underfed Bengalis mattered much less than that of sturdy Greeks. This is Churchill's actual quote. And when conscience-stricken British officials wrote to him, pointing out that people were dying because of this decision, he peevishly wrote in the margins of the file, "Why hasn't Gandhi died yet?" So all notions that the British were trying to do their colonial enterprise out of enlightened despotism, to try and bring the benefits of colonialism and civilization to the benighted heathen. I'm sorry, Churchill's conduct in 43 is simply one example of many that gave a lie to this myth. As others have said on the proposition, violence and racism were the reality.
It's pretty long. It goes on. I've watched this a couple times. It goes on for another 10 minutes. You guys wanted me just to react, to give my opinion on this. I've seen this a few times. Interesting question. Does Britain own reparations to India? Boy, I think they do, but can they pay? I don't know necessarily how you work this out. I know reparations were given to the slaves in America, where you got 20 acres and a mule. Excuse me. I think, being of British descent, most of my lineage is British. The American history. I think you can look at the British Empire, the Crown. There used to be a saying that the sun never set on the Crown. The imperialism as a form of terrorism. This isn't a situation where there was some great war in India and Britain came to help India, and India said, "You know what? Would you build a base here? We would feel really safe if you had some kind of presence here, and in return we'll sign these trade deals with you." This was kind of enforced upon people. And I think there should be reparations for this. I do think that Great Britain owes India both in a public apology. I think that maybe the best way that they can do things for reparations' sakes is in trade agreements that favor India, if they don't have the cash. How much that be, I don't know. I know that there was a case of I think it was Korean women that the Japanese army in World War II forced into prostitution. They called them comfort girls, and they just paid reparations for that. I think maybe it's a tiered response. But he was talking about the fabric loomers having their thumbs broken and, doing all these things to destroy their industry. If you are a descendant of one of those and you can prove it, maybe you get some kind of cash settlement for that, and then there should just be this tiered response to help India. I think when you look at India, the thing that amazes me about India, truly amazes me, they are surrounded by nastiness, man. They are in a bad part of the neighborhood. If the globe is the neighborhood, they are in a bad part of the neighborhood, man. A place that you don't want to be walking around at after dark. And here you have this light on a mountain shining. You have communism surrounding it. You have radical Islamicism surrounding it. And yet the people are so friendly. They're so kind. It amazes me that they're not bitter, that they're not warmongers. And this is, again, I'll stop right there. There's a prophecy about the kings of the East. And I think India is part of that, and it has to go into biblical studies, and that's one of the last world powers, or the kings of the East, and I think India is definitely part of that. But yeah, it's a great video. I would encourage you to watch the entire thing. I think you will be enlightened to it. It's going to make you think, I think, which is always important for us to do. But yeah, reparations should happen, and it should be a tiered response. There should be public apology. They should own it. They should go to these loomers' families and say, "Here is the cash settlement." If you figured out, how much money they lost, and he kind of gave a stat that was 24% basically, and then it went down to 4 or something like that. You can figure out mathematically how much they owed plus interest, and you can go and do these things. And I think the other thing that can happen out of this is that you can then align, because you're pulling out of the BRICS. They're pulling out of the EU. They can do what they want. They can go make an alliance. They can go and try to write this way, and kind of just work that. It should be like some remorse, I think, on the UK for this. But anyways, those are my thoughts, my ramblings. Thank you so much for suggesting that. I really appreciate it, because I like to do the trailer reactions. I like to have fun and joke around and make fun of stuff, but I also like serious stuff too. And I think this was outstanding. Good job, my friends, for suggesting that. Hey, I will catch you later. I flashed the peace sign a little too fast. Went up too fast. Peace. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't. That way you can stay up to date on all of our latest videos. I'll catch you guys later.